Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about cleaning house and then what we refer to as your baseline day and your depletion day and what each of those mean as it relates to getting started with, your fat loss program. Now, here's a picture and, in the center, just kind of envision this as your stomach region. And let's say that this square region represents all the capacity of our stomach itself. Now, obviously, it's not that big. It's actually about the size of your fist. So, when you eat a certain amount of food, you're going to feel really, really full. So, we all know about nutrient-dense food, meaning foods that have lots of nutritional value per, forkful. And we also know about empty calories, or foods that have lots of calories but don't necessarily present a lot of nutrient density, meaning they don't have really any good nutritional value per spoon or forkful. So when we eat, we want to obviously eat the best foods possible. But as it relates to this process here, up here at the top, I talk about cleaning house. And initially when people come to us, they're eating in excess of 100 grams of carbohydrates per day. Now, I can see routinely when I see someone that comes in and their body fat is, above a certain point, they're going to get an accumulated level of body fat that they probably don't visually like the way it looks when they look in the mirror, or it just doesn't feel good because they're carrying in excess of 50 or 100 pounds. So they really want to get that down. Typically, it's going to take about 10 pounds a month for a weight loss program. So if you have about 100 pounds, give yourself about a year to lose that. 50 pounds, anywhere from 5 to 6 months. 10 and 20 pounds, anywhere from 2 to 3 months, barring that you do everything perfectly. So what we first do is get you from wherever you are, and I call it a seafood diet, what you see you eat. And we want to get you down initially to the 100 grams per day range. For a lot of people, that's going to be about as far as they're going to go. They're going to get to this stage and they're going to achieve a great deal of success because they were eating 300, 400, 500 grams of carbs, drinking them in the form of sodas, and eating fast food. So their carbohydrate intake is probably relatively huge. And so we'll just say anything above this line here as, a seafood diet right here at the line. This represents 100 grams here. And then in between that range of 100 grams down to this next line, we're going to say that's about 50 grams. And then from this line down, that represents another 50 grams. Now it's supposed to be somewhat in the middle. It looks a little bit off, but just for the sake of this visual demonstration. So if at your seafood level, you're up here, we get down to the clean house level, which is 100 grams, and 100 grams on down to 0 here at the lowest point. Now, when we start talking about baseline, what we mean for baseline is what amount of carbs you need to recover from your workout that you just did and to help you operate somewhat normally throughout the day, but still be in a fat loss zone. So it's still going to be within this 100 gram range. It's not necessarily going to be at 0, but it's going to be probably for most of you above 50 grams. And it could be at 50, it could be 55, 60, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, all the way back to 100. But let's say you're that person that at 100 you're not losing fat. But when we drop it down to 90 or 80, you start losing fat, you still feel good, you're functioning properly. That becomes your baseline intake. So what we do with you is this represents your baseline day. That baseline day would be the day that you work out. You're eating, a regular fat loss menu plan, but post-workout, you may have on that baseline day a protein shake that has some fruit in it and a low to no carb protein shake. And the only carbs in that shake will be that fruit that you have, unless it's a plant protein base that is going to have a little bit more carbs, but much more friendly carbs than the types that you might find in some of the other drinks out there that are loaded in sugar. All right, so This represents your baseline or your basic day-to-day operation on a training day. So it's that post-workout shake, maybe your baseline, and then after that, all meals are more like what I'm going to refer to now as depletion meals. Now let's say you want to go into full-on depletion. You've been and have established you've gone from the seafood diet into the clean house diet, and now we've learned about our baseline, what we have on a training day, a workout day. And let's say you train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you would have that post-workout shake, and depending upon your frame type, if you were a ectomorph, mesomorph, or endomorph, that would determine if you get any additional carbs that day. For most, it's going to be the protein shake post-workout, and that's it. And then it's back to this depletion day. Now, the depletion day is any level beneath 50 grams that allows you to still stay awake, function normally. And I use that term normally. I'm sitting here, making quotation marks around normally, meaning you can still function. Now, this is where it starts to get tricky for some people because you have to learn how to interpret what it is you're feeling. When we start going from our baseline day down into a depletion day, a lot of people start to get kind of emotional. Women are very familiar with it. When they go into their monthly menstrual cycles, they have, a certain time period before and after where, there's water storage and release and emotions get a little bit different. Men, because we don't have that menstrual cycle, we also have a certain time during the month where we might get emotionally a little different. But when you start doing depletion and baseline, and even for the clean house, if you've eaten a lot of carbs, it really sets you up for a lot of emotional turbulence. So there takes a period of time for you to adapt. And this is why I suggest to people, if you're not familiar with the cleaning house process and you haven't established what your baseline is, I wouldn't suggest trying depletion until you've got the other things mastered. And what I mean by mastered is, regularly listing your foods in MyFitnessPal, understanding your carbs, your fats, your proteins, and then associating how you feel on a given day with what you've eaten, whether that day was a high carb day, whether it was a baseline day, or whether it was depletion day. So now, the depletion day is definitely underneath your baseline towards zero. I don't see too many people going to zero carbs because you can get, down to about 25 grams and around there, 20 grams. And it gets pretty difficult because even if you're having vegetables, even though you might have some fats, some of the fats like avocado have a little carb in them. Some of the nut butters have a little bit of carb in them. And if you are really tricky, I can teach you how to do that as far as using, instead of the nuts, using actually almond oil or coconut oil to get some of those essential fats without the carbs in them. So that's when you're really competitive and you want to get seriously peeled. But for most people, just learning how to clean house here at 100 grams of carbs, then establishing what your baseline is, your baseline carb intake in between 50 and 100, and then understand what your depletion day is between, usually for most people, could be up as high as 75, but most people at about 50 all the way down to 25 grams is your depletion zone. And this is where major fat loss starts to occur. Now, when we drop these carbs like this, our fat intake should climb. We should also be using some extra B complex. There are some other supplements, but we'll talk about that in another video so that you can get a handle on understanding that process. But and your water intake has to be ginormous, a gallon plus per day. And I also encourage the use of sodium unless you have high blood pressure. Sodium on a lot of your foods, salting them helps retain a lot more water in the muscle. For all my endurance athletes, I recommend creatine, and for all of my people in this process, I also recommend super greens added to your post-workout shake, which I'll also talk about in other supplements. So this is going from seafood into cleaning house, and clean house is at 100 grams is our top level of carbs for the day. Then we learned and talked about the baseline day, which is your normal operating level without causing fat gain. And then from baseline, we talked about what your depletion is, and that's anything between 50 and 25 grams, and it could be as high as 75 grams of carbs if you happen to be an ectomorph. Remember, soma types, ectomorph, mesomorph and endomorphs all have different metabolisms, so they all are going to have a different level here. I'll talk about that in another video, and we'll move on to that now.